I'm not going to think again. So for those of you who do not know me, my name is Veronica Valles, and I have a little bit of congestion. Juniper and I do not get along, and apparently Juniper and Cedar are really kind of high right now. And I'm just grateful to be here because the last time I was online and I was determined, because I have a challenging time driving at night. I need new glasses. I was determined to be here because for me personally, there's greater joy being in this energy. So I'm grateful to be here. So we're going to talk about the joy of now. If you are new, I have known Cornell Kinderconnect and Bobby Perkins for many, many years. I knew Cornell, it's actually 16 years, or is it 17? 16 years this January that we met. And so I've had the privilege of seeing the evolution of the Dallas Meditation Center, all the joy that has been brought to this community, the expansion, you know, the loss, the transition of Chi Sing, but each one of you here is a beautiful vision of the joy of mindful living. That was the intention of this place. So I in contemplating, it's like, well, what am I going to talk about? I saw my book, The Joy of Now Journal by Paige Burkes. So I teach children mindfulness. I've been teaching children mindfulness for 9 years through my nonprofit. I'm only known as Miss Veronica, Miss V, and I bring in a lot of joy, but a donor gave me this book and it says mindfulness in 5 minutes a day. And I know Paige Burkes said that mindfulness is about being, not doing. So the practice is maybe part of the doing to get us into the being. And I'm going to share a couple of practices at the end. But I want to begin first with my friend Tashi Nyima, who's a Tibetan Buddhist monk and teacher in Dallas, a dear friend who actually supported me that very first year in starting mindfulness with the kids at Alex Sanger Elementary. But he wrote for the new year, he wrote, may we experience 12 months of equanimity, 52 weeks of rejoicing, 365 days of compassion, 8,760 hours of loving kindness, 52,600 minutes of wisdom, and I love this one, and 3,153,600 seconds of enlightenment. And I'm like, that's a lot of mindful moments. So may we have a year of at least a little bit of that in our lives. And I wanted to talk about joy because often we're setting these intentions, we're setting the doingness of life, and we forget to be present to the joy that's already here and available. And I love that in the sharing, I heard a couple of people actually use the word joy with your kids playing, with your, neighbors and community, the gratefulness, the gratitude with your dogs. Because oftentimes we are so caught up in the doing of life and the to-do of life and the adulting of life that we forget the joy of life that is always present. All you have to do is be around kids, because we've forgotten that we were once children too, that they are innately joyful. And it's adults that can often stop that with their impatience. Maybe parents are overwhelmed or stressed. So I also have the very, very beautiful privilege of being most favorite aunt to my 7 nieces and nephews. And they were really the ones that brought me through a long-term illness that I've experienced, that many people have heard me talk about, to the joy of the moment, to the simplest things in life that can just ignite you into remembering what's already here. Joy is a state of being. It's like a spring, this underground spring that's always available, and every once in a while it will arise. And oftentimes we're so busy with the doing, we forget to allow it to arise. But it's there. It's an innate part of our being, whether you call it your Buddha nature or the Christ consciousness or whatever it is an innate part of our being. And we tend to forget about it. Now, I am not a Buddhist teacher, even though I've practiced Buddhism for many, many years, Nichiren Shoshu Buddhism. I've been doing some Zen with the Upai Zen Center online. But oftentimes when we hear the teachings, it's the acknowledgement of the suffering of the world, right? So we've got the 4 noble truths about the truth of suffering, the truth of the origin of suffering, the truth of the cessation of suffering, and the truth of the path to the cessation of suffering, which is the Eightfold Noble Path. We hear about the 3 poisons: greed, hatred, delusion. We hear about from Patanjali, the yoga, the 5 kleshas, all right? So attachment, ignorance. But what we forget is that that's part of the human experience when we have forgotten our innate joy and we have forgotten our Buddha nature, and just, it's a part of being human. We don't want to denigrate it or negate it, but we all have these experiences of suffering. But the other side of the coin of suffering is joy, that innate state of our being. And sometimes we forget that other part of the coin. So think about it for a moment. When is the last time that you can remember being in just absolute joy, a moment of joy? Just contemplate it. We're going to share later. But just bring that up, that moment of joy. And what was it? Like, what were you experiencing? How did it feel? What was going on? And if you can't remember one recently, then go back as far back as you can. I can remember being little. I could never sing, always been off key, not my gift, didn't get my grandma's voice. But I remember being on my rocking horse. We lived on Gilbert, I'm rocking, and I'm I've always been like a little metaphysical, mystical mutt, and I'm singing to whatever this thing, the divine is, it's sunshine, and I'm just singing. And I just, I sometimes ask myself, I go, was that real? Like, was that real? Because I just see this little girl in her joy, riding her little horse. Till months later, somebody stole it, But that moment was pure. My nieces and nephews were a perfect mirror. They're now, the oldest is 31, the youngest is about to turn 20. And the youngest, Anthony, I'll never forget this moment, but my nieces and nephews were the ones that really brought me back to the simplicity of joy and the now. We'd go outside and we'd play. We'd hang out chasing the fireflies and butterflies. But Anthony, who's about to turn 20, he's at Texas Tech, he was 2 years old. We're at my mother's house, my parents' house, my mother and father, but we're standing on the porch on the steps. And he's at the very top step. It's really windy. And I turn to look at him and he tilts his head back. He feels the wind and he screeches in utter delight. And that was pure joy in the present moment. Our brains are wired to keep us safe. And our brains remember the negative more than the positive. And it's wired that way. They call it negativity bias because that's how our ancestors evolved. That's how they were safe from the woolly mammoths. But what happens with the negativity bias is the negative or difficult tends to stick to us like Velcro, but the positive is like Teflon. So think about it. Whenever you ask people, so like when I teach the kids mindfulness, I'm building their emotional vocabulary. And it's great because Brene Brown says adults only know 3 emotions, mad, sad, and glad. And my second graders know about 18 already, which is great, we're starting. But what you'll always notice when you ask people to list their feelings or emotions, they'll list the difficult ones first. Frustration, anger, annoyance. And all of a sudden you'll have this little, cheery bright kid going, what about joy, Miss Veronica? I'm like, yes, joy, remember the positivity. So we as adults, because we're wired to stay safe, to keep our family safe, to keep, the world safe, we tend to focus on the negative and we forget to celebrate the joy. Now, the beauty and the synchronicity of this conversation is that I picked this topic, weeks and weeks ago, and I was on the Upai Zen Center's Dharma Talk Wednesday, and it was Sensei Amy Diller, and she was talking about on joy. And so I'm like, oh, this is perfect. It's the exact same things, different quotes, and she's got Zen stories. But she told this one story that I loved about the Dalai Lama sending a Tibetan monk, I guess to Europe, to really engage with, I think it was one of Catholic priests or something. So anyhow, the priest is showing the monk, all around the church and explaining the different, this is where we have this sacrament, this is where we do this. And he goes, and this is where people come for confession, just to release their sins and for forgiveness. And then the monk is looking around and he's like, so where's your other box? And the priest is like, what are you talking about? He goes, don't you have a place for rejoicing? Yeah. He goes, don't you celebrate the good? And think about it. When we began We begin our new year with a list of things we want to change, with a list of things that we, may, don't find very pleasing about ourselves. We set intentions and goals, which are good. But how many of you set the intention that I want to experience greater joy today and every day? To allow yourself to have those mindful moments. As a mindfulness teacher and an amateur photographer, I'm constantly present to the beauty of life. I will find that if I'm in my head and I'm ruminating, I will miss some of the simplest moments. But when I allow myself just to open my awareness and to be present to the joy of being, just simply in my walk, I'll catch some little blue bird, like today with my niece Isabella at the lake, and you're talking about the pelicans. We were watching them too, and we're just like the beauty and the joy of being in nature, of seeing this little bird, of trying to get the picture, and then Bella laughing because it flies faster than I get my camera out. Of watching the pelicans, literally, the conversation Bella and I had, so who's leading all the birds? Because one minute they're all over here, and the next minute they're all flying this way, and just that allowing that childlike wonder to be present while you're watching other people with their headsets on. They're really serious about exercise, and I'm being all joyful and taking it all in. And so the question becomes, it's how do we experience joy when there is so much suffering? Whether it's personal suffering in our communities, in the world. And like I said, it's the other side of the coin is joy that is present. But I feel like if we allow ourselves those tiny, beautiful moments that the author Cheryl Strayed talks about, that then we fill that cup of our inner being with joy. And then we have to allow ourselves to get out of the way. So joy is this hidden river, as I said, that rushes out when we allow it to. So once again, take a moment right now and just kind of scan through your body and think of a time that you felt absolute joy. And where did you feel it? How did it arise? And just like with any emotion, we don't cling to it, we don't become attached to it, but we allow it. And think of a moment when you were experiencing deep suffering, like I just experienced on and off again, some whatever new virus is out there. I tell my kids, give me hugs, not bugs. But I was so sick, and I hadn't been sick in 5 years. But think about the time that you were suffering. And then that moment arose, just like you broke through, whether you were breaking through the fever or breaking through the cough. And there was just that one thing that brought you to joy. For me, it was sitting on my love seat, congested, miserable, complaining. And then all of a sudden, something arose in me that said, but you're safe, Veronica. And I looked around at I called my treehouse casita. I'm like, I am. I have everything that I need. I need a little bit more Sudafed, but I have almost everything that I need. And that moment of just allowing that joy to rise gave me a break from the what was happening with my body, but it brought me to that place of present moment awareness, to be in gratitude and to allow joy. And then once the infection cleared through and I was able to taste my coffee again, pure joy, because I'm a coffee drinker, pure joy. So contemplate the simple things that bring you joy. Do you allow yourself that gift of joy daily? And what will it take to invite more joy in your life? So I'm going to pick a couple of practices from this book, because the Joy of Now journal is all about these different practices. But the shift in consciousness is that understanding that we all suffer. Thich Nhat Hanh talks about that. He goes, let it arise though. And when it arises, it can move through. But then also allow the joy to arise and allow that to be present and move through. I say that complaining is chaotic and contagious, and I've been very guilty of that. But heart coherence and being in joy is calming and connecting to a deeper well of being. And that joy anchors you in the now. And when we're in the now, we're not spinning in our heads, which I'm also very talented at doing, the queen of rumination, but it's that little pause. So when I walk in nature, that is where I allow joy. When the blue heron flies above me and I can feel the electricity of its wingspan flying over me and just staring there as it sits on the limb and just gratitude for that moment. When I'm at school and my pre-K kids and my kindergarten kids are at lunch and they see me come and they're like, Miss Steffi, joy. When my nieces and nephews come in town, or my niece today calls me for coffee, joy. Dr. Richie Davidson, who's a neuroscientist and author, says that a distracted mind is really an unhealthy mind. And when he began doing work with the Dalai Lama, he was first doing a lot of research on like depression, anxiety, and fear. And the Dalai Lama asked him, he's like, why aren't you studying compassion? Why aren't you studying kindness? Why aren't you studying joy? And Richie said that was like a light bulb. It was a wake-up call for him. And so they began to study that capacity, that innate state of being within us and how to activate it, that we're not bypassing the difficult, but we're also not allowing ourselves to spin in it. And he says that it just takes 20 seconds to focus on something to create a shift. And the reminder as I teach my kids, I go, difficult emotions are difficult. They're also signals. Anger is a signal, frustration is a signal. We're not trying to suppress it and we're not trying to deny it. But the invitation is to have mindful awareness is, when am I getting in story? When am I building up like this big like ego defense system, which I'm also a writer, so I'm very good at that. You know, Academy Award performance for best dramatic story. And then to allow yourself for 20 seconds to focus on this one thing that brings you joy. Whether it is a cup of coffee or a pastry with my niece who was in town from college, or the sunset, or everybody here. To give yourself 20 seconds, just 20 seconds to rewire your brain and then start activating greater joy, because that greater joy is what will be your anchor for when the difficult moments do arrive, and they will. But we don't forget that state of being, that innate nature that is joy, that is within us, that arises when we become aware and allow it to. So I'm going to pick a couple of practices. We're going to practice together. Are you willing? Are you willing? All right, just a few. So first of all, it's a beautiful book. And it's beautifully decorated, and she has quotes and just so many activities for mindfulness that you yourself can also do. But I'm going to start with the Thich Nhat Hanh one. And there's a quote and then there's a practice, all right? So we'll do two. Sometimes your joy is a source of your smile, but sometimes your smile can be the source of your joy. Your physical state significantly influences your feelings and emotions. And if you're in a bad mood, you can choose to change it to something better. Smile for 30 seconds, especially if you don't feel like it, and see how you feel. Or do something active and uplifting and see how long you can maintain that bad mood. Choosing new activities can change your emotions, which changes your thoughts, which changes your actions. And it says, list some of your favorite activities or positive actions you can use to encourage a better mood. But what we're going to do instead, I'm going to invite you to turn around and connect with people without words, at least two, just smiling. Because see, you're all facing me. Now you're going to face each other and pick two people and just catch each other's eyes and smile and notice how you feel. So take a moment, connect with each other. Smile. Maybe three. Smile. See how that makes you feel. Can't be grouchy and smile at the same time, right? Notice the shift, right? Smiling. For Season for Peace and Nonviolence, which starts at the end of January, day 2, the first day's curse, the day 2 peace practice is smiling. So try it this week. Because sometimes it freaks people out because they're not used to you smiling. You're like, don't be creepy. But connect with people and notice the difference that it makes. And notice the joy that arises in you, but also notice the joy that arises in the other person to be seen and to feel that joy, all right? So that's one practice, right? Practice number 2. This is John Kabat-Zinn. The little things, the little moments, they aren't little. Our lives are composed of an endless number of moments, most of them little. 3,153,600 seconds. That's how many moments we have, all right? So he says our lives are composed of an endless number of moments, most of them little. A glance, a few words, a breathtaking scene, a touch. Each of these may seem little, but what would life be without them? Make a list of 8 little things or moments that have been memorable or have positively impacted your life. And as you go through your day, notice how many of these types of little moments you encountered that you may not have noticed before. So I'm going to invite you to think of 2. And I'm going to invite you to connect with somebody next to you. This will be our last practice, and share those 2 little moments that bring you joy. So connect. 2 little things. Alex. I've heard about the dog. Let's go with and then did you get people? Yeah.
Sort of like, we have a really good game and like being able to
Yeah, beautiful. I shared having a cheese Danish with my niece Macy. She's in town from college. And then today with my niece Isabella, seeing all the colors. Outside of Sunset Bay, you can cut it off the road. When you drive around, they shift on this side of the lake. They're phenomenal.
Yeah, I've seen them.
Yeah, they're lots of noise.
So if you have just a few more seconds to wrap up all that joy. You might have to bring them in.
That's a beautiful energy. Can you feel that too? Can y'all feel that too?
Yeah, that is beautiful. Can you take a moment and just pause, even as others are wrapping up, and literally close your eyes and just feel that. Feel the energy in the room right now. Allow yourself to smile from the inside out. This is the beauty of joy. This is the beauty of community. This is the beauty of connecting. The joy of now. A joyful life is made up of joyful moments gracefully strung together. Brene Brown. One more quote. If you carry joy in your heart, you can heal any moment. Carl Santana. So it was a beautiful experience to feel your joy. And just to remember that we are these Buddha beings in this human realm where you will have suffering. You will have difficult emotions, but you also have your practice. And you also have the awareness of that innate joy that is your being. And to remember those tiny moments, to allow them into your life. I'm accused sometimes of being ridiculously joyful. And I tell people, I go, because I almost experienced death in my 30s. And I just want to be present to life. But I also know that I have my experiences of suffering. I have my experiences of grief, but nothing or no one can ever steal my joy. So the joy of now is within you. It's amplified, as you could feel in the room when you connect. It's training your brain by dropping it into your heart to remember those joyous moments, to allow them to arise. and to give yourself the gift of those moments that bring you joy. And not so much doing all the time, but the being present, whether it's just yourself or with the one you love or with out in nature or around with people. And watch how it changes people when you bring in joy in the room and you give permission for people to also experience the joy of now. So I am joyfully grateful. Thank you. Are we switching?